In a dog-eat-dog world, it's time to nip something in the butt. There's a linguistic phenomenon that's spreading like wildflowers. In this video, let's investigate eggcorns, the misheard versions of terms that ride roughshod over the originals. Some may pass you by without you battering an eyelid. You take them completely for granted. Others will make you want to curl up in the feeble position and cry, "Cease and desist." So let's see which ones pass mustard and which are just damp squids. Without further ado, it's time for another Rob Words. Okay, I can see you're chomping at the bit, so I won't leave you on tender hooks any longer. Let's get down to brass tacks. What exactly is an eggcorn? Well, let me show you, because I just used a whole load of them. So what do all these terms and phrases have in common? Well, they're wrong. The phrase isn't dog-eat-dog world, it's dog-eat-dog world. And you don't nip something in the butt, not if you want to avoid a lawsuit, you nip it in the bud. And it's the fetal position, not the feeble position. But nevertheless, these are all things that people actually say. They're close to the original sayings, in fact, they make their own sort of sense, but they're not quite right. They are eggcorns. The term eggcorn, meaning these quirky mishearings, was first coined by a group of linguists back only a couple of decades ago, and there's a charming story behind why they called them that. So basically what happened is, well actually, why don't I let one of them explain it?
I'm sorry, how the name arose is what you're asking?
That's esteemed Professor Mark Lieberman from the University of Pennsylvania, who's pretty much the eggcorn king. Google eggcorns and his name soon comes up. So I asked him if he wouldn't mind joining us to tell us what happened, and he said yes. It all started back in 2004.
Another linguist named Chris Potts sent me email about a case in which a woman had written egg space corns, meaning acorn. She was concerned about the fact that acorns had fallen on her car because she had parked it under an oak tree. When we looked into it, we discovered that there were many other people who had made a similar inference, so to speak. And for at least certain people from certain dialect regions of the US, acorn and eggcorn are actually basically homophonous. They're basically pronounced the same way.
Professor Lieberman and his fellow linguists felt they stumbled across something as yet undefined, a phenomenon that didn't fit within the definitions of other linguistic mix-ups. This wasn't a straightforward mishearing. Eggcorn sort of made sense. I mean, it does look like an egg, and it is a corn or a seed. So the question was, with this new brand of aural accident, what to call it?
So Jeff Pullum, a week later, said, well, look, if there's no suitable word, then we should just make it eponymous. That is, take the example as the source of the name, and let's call them eggcorns. So we suggested that, and the term stuck. So it has now made it into, the Oxford English Dictionary and Merriam-Webster's Dictionary and the Collins English Dictionary and so on.
Well, it's not every day you get to hear from someone who got a word into the dictionary. To fully understand what eggcorns are, you sort of need to understand what they're not as well, because there are lots of other everyday errors that we make in speech that are similar, but they ain't eggcorns. One category of which are malapropisms. So these are named after a character in the 18th century play The Rivals by Richard Brinsley Sheridan, the snooty Mrs. Malaprop. Her name's actually a play on the French term malapropos, which basically means wrong or inappropriate. And a quirk of her character was to use wrong or inappropriate words. As Professor Lieberman says, she's
trying to use fancier words than she knows and getting them wrong, like talking about allegory as an alligator.
She's as headstrong as an allegory on the banks of the Nile. Nay, madam.
That one's a beaut. Other gems from Mrs. Malaprop include, "He is the very pineapple of politeness." Pinnacle. And, "Sure, if I reprehend anything in this world, it is the use of my oracular tongue and a nice derangement of epitaphs." Apprehend, vernacular, arrangement, epithets. So when anyone else makes a similarly bad choice of word, we can call that a malapropism. Isn't an eggcorn just a type of malapropism then? Well, no.
We usually think of malapropisms as being sort of mistakes that are the result of people being uneducated or something like that, whereas eggcorns are something that can happen to anybody, basically.
Yes, even you. Or me, in fact. Researching this, I discovered I've been using free rein wrongly all my life, or should I say free rein? Yes, because the image it's supposed to conjure is one of a horse being kept only loosely under control, not one of a monarch with unlimited power. I think I've probably gotten away with it because the two sound exactly the same, but free rein is a classic eggcorn because it makes its own kind of sense, and poor Mrs. Malaprop and her malapropisms do not. There's another funny phenomenon that is like an eggcorn, but different. The mondegreen. Like eggcorn, the term mondegreen comes from an example of the error itself. It comes from this Scottish folk song.
Ye Hielands and ye Lowlands, oh where hae ye been? They hae slain yellow Marie and laid him on the green.
Poor Lady Mondegreen. Except, let's watch it again, but with the actual lyrics.
Oh where hae ye been? They hae slain yellow Marie and laid him on the green.
The most famous Mondegreens are misheard song lyrics. You know how Jimi Hendrix did not in fact sing "Excuse me while I kiss this guy."
Excuse me while I kiss this guy.
And the reason that they're different to eggcorns is not that they appear in songs, in fact they can appear anywhere, but that their meanings are completely different to what was originally intended. But an eggcorn replaces the original phrase without altering the intended meaning. Whether you're describing someone as a social pariah or a social piranha, you're making the same point. So now we have an idea what eggcorns are and are not. See how many you can spot in this next bit. So I've had to go deep into the internet in researching this video, into areas ripe with dangers. And what's more, because we've got builders in at my place, I've been doing it on an unsecured Wi-Fi network at a cafe. Luckily, I've been protected to all intensive purposes because I've been using NordVPN. It's no old wise tale. A VPN really is a brilliant way to keep your data safe when surfing the web, and NordVPN gives you all that protection and more. It blocks malware if you wander into uncharted parts of the internet, stops you being tracked by cloaking your IP, sounds the death knell for malicious ads by blocking them, and keeps you secure around the clock. Plus you can have it on up to 6 devices at a time, so you can keep your whole family safe too. Having a VPN leaves you with all kinds of benefits at your beck and call, like enabling you to access streaming content from all over the world. And if you've got holiday plans, another French benefit is that NordVPN can save you money on travel websites that hike their prices when they see that you've been there before. So to solve your internet security problems in one foul swoop, go to nordvpn.com/robwords to get the 2-year plan with an exclusive deal, plus 1 bonus month on top. It's risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee, so just give it a go. Or did you spot them all? So, have I mentioned any that you've been using wrongly yet? If not, I am determined to find one by the time that we're through, because it's almost certain that you've used at least one. And that's not to insult you. Eggcorns are not necessarily a sign of ignorance. On the contrary, in many cases, they're a sign of creative intelligence. Eggcorns very often form when someone is trying to make sense of what to their ear is nonsensical. They're doing verbal gymnastics to try and find a phrase that works with the context and the sounds that they've just come across. Say you've heard someone voicing disapproval about another person's clothing, or more precisely, lack of it. Well, if you've never come across the phrase scantily clad before, or the word scantily at all, it's perfectly logical to then interpret that sound as scandally clad. It's kind of clever. You even had to invent a word. As one of Professor Lieberman's colleagues, Jeff Pullum, puts it, it would be so easy to dismiss eggcorns as signs of illiteracy and stupidity, but they are nothing of the sort. They are imaginative attempts at relating something heard to lexical material already known. So let's see if we can find some others. Well, if you are scandally clad, you're only one step away from another eggcorn, but one that has me and Mark Lieberman confused. One that is troubling me is butt naked and buck naked, because I can't quite work out which one's correct. I've definitely been using butt naked.
Well, I don't know. The American Heritage Dictionary says that buck naked is an alteration of butt naked. Well, they're not sure. But Paul Bryan's in Common Errors in English Usage says that butt naked is a mistake, that it was originally buck naked, referring to Native Americans and black slaves, so it's condescending and racist, and so probably shouldn't be used. You know, who knows?
It's exactly why it's causing me such pain. It's because I can't find out. I was hoping you might have the answer, but
Well, apparently not.
So there we are. Well, actually, it was quite funny. I was willing to leave the issue there, but Professor Lieberman was not, and he continued to try and get to the bottom of it, even while I was attempting to ask him about something completely different. Do you think you're hypersensitive to spotting them?
I'm sorry, before we get to that, I just looked up buck naked in the OED. It says it's colloquial, originally and chiefly US, and it says CF, butt naked, but it doesn't tell you which one came from which.
I think in future I'll just say naked. But these eggcorns really can be found in all sorts of contexts, from the militaristic, check out shot across the bowels instead of the nautical shot across the bows, to the medical. Have you ever heard of someone living with old-timers disease or suffering migraines? Or how about having post-traumatic stress disorder? Google them, they all get used. I mean, really? Old-timers disease? Well, if you have ever at any point thought Alzheimer's disease was called that, you are not alone. All these people are with you.
Alzheimer's disease, who knows who Alzheimer's was, but if you think of it as old-timers disease, it makes sense because it afflicts old-timers.
True, this is a case where the mishearing actually makes arguably more sense than the actual term. And there are lots of eggcorns that, to the modern listener, seem more logical than the original. Take whet your appetite instead of whet your appetite. I mean, when was the last time anyone used whet in any other context? Whereas the idea of a soggy, salivating mouth is the perfect image for the situation. While we're dining out on this, isn't just desserts an easier concept than just desserts? I mean, we don't use dessert as in something one deserves very often now, whereas you might well imagine someone receiving the appropriate pudding to befit their past behaviour. No ice cream if you don't finish your vegetables. And there are more. Isn't a squid more likely to be damp than a squib? I mean, what is a squib anyway?
It was a word that was used for, small explosives. What we would now call a firecracker was called a squib.
Ah, so the idea is that it doesn't go off because it's damp.
It got wet.
Yeah, now that does obviously make more sense than... And why would...
Damp is normal for a squid. In fact, if it was dried, that would be problematic in general. So.
Yeah, there's nothing disappointing about a sea creature being moist. If you haven't found this video to be a damp squid so far, maybe hit subscribe. I'll be eternally grateful. You know, there's a tendency when talking about linguistic errors to feel like there's something new. Every generation tends to loathe to some extent the way the generation after them speaks. And eggcorns might seem to support this declinist idea. Why are we now starting to get these things wrong? But the fact is, the name may be relatively new, but eggcorns themselves are not. For example, people have been misquoting William Shakespeare's "To the Manor Born" as "To the Manor Born" for centuries. Why? Because it makes sense, doesn't it? Actually, it was the name of an occasionally funny British sitcom in the 1980s.
He's got about as much charm as Grimsby Dockyard.
Another old mishearing is asparagus as the adorable sparrowgrass, for which you can find examples as far back as the 17th century. It was widely used until the Latin lovers put everyone straight. Although some language fans will argue that that is not an eggcorn, but something called a folk etymology. Why? Because for at least a time, sparrowgrass or slight variants on it were the standard form, rather than just being used by an unknowing minority.
What distinguishes an eggcorn from a so-called folk etymology is that it's a sort of isolated event. That is, a few people here and there make the mistake, but it's not something that becomes a standard part of the language.
A further good example of a folk etymology is also of the vegetative variety. It's the Jerusalem artichoke, which does not come from Jerusalem. It's actually native to North America. But the Jerusalem bit is a result of it being related to the sunflower plant, the name for which in Italian is girasole. That got misheard or reinterpreted by English speakers as Jerusalem. A Jerusalem artichoke isn't an artichoke either, but the reason we call it one is the result of another catalogue of errors involving the Italians and the French and goodness knows who else. Too much to go into now. The point is, it's a folk etymology because the folk came up with their own erroneous interpretation of where the words came from, and it stuck. And it's a case that Professor Lieberman actually raised in his original blog post back in 2004.
I mentioned Jerusalem artichoke as an example, as a relevant example, and of course that is a folk etymology because it's the standard term for that particular species of flower. But anyway, the phenomenon of reinterpreting either a word from an older version of your language, a word borrowed from another language, a word from a technical sub-vocabulary or whatever, in terms of a different set of morphemes that are more familiar to you and make more sense to you, is something I'm sure people have been doing as long as there have been languages.
So that's another reason not to feel bad if you've been using one of these eggcorns, folk etymologies, mondegreens or malapropisms, because the fact is they've probably always existed. So if you can think of any good examples of those, then by all means stick them in the comments below. Oh, and Professor Lieberman wants your help with something.
I don't know very many eggcorn-like inventions in other languages than English. I know French reasonably well. Seems like I should know some French eggcorns. I can read Spanish. I can read German. And of course, I could have read about, I probably have in the end, read about eggcorns in other languages. I just don't remember.
So if you know any, pop them in the comments and I'll flag them up to him. Or alternatively, go to the blog post that he wrote because of our little chat where he asked for more examples of those. I'll leave a link below. The only one I can think of is related to our friend from earlier in the video, the damp squid. A pal of mine got a little confused by the German word for squid, which is Tintenfisch, literally ink fish. But she thought it was Tittenfish, which would be an altogether different animal. If you have enjoyed this, I think you're going to like my one about medieval words that I think we should bring back. Or if not, maybe this one. And if you didn't enjoy it, well, don't make me the scapegoat, geez.